Morning, everybody who's signed in so far. This is Joe Purcell. We're going to be kicking off things here in a few minutes. Just try to give everybody a chance here to sip on some coffee and finish getting signed in. Please stand by. Good morning, everybody. This is Joe Purcell here at Virtual Graffiti. We're just going to be starting everything here in about another couple minutes, just giving everybody a chance here to finish signing in. Thank you for attending the event today. All right, looks like we've got a lot of people here signed in for our webinar this morning, or afternoon, depending on where you're located in the U.S. here. Wanted to just do a quick introduction of myself and my co-host today, Roy Ballard. My name is Joe Purcell. I'm the Trend Micro Brand Manager here at Virtual Graffiti, compliance level security specialist. I've got about 10 years of managed security service providing experience. Roy Ballard is our Trend Micro U.S. channel sales engineer. He'll be presenting the Trend Micro portion of the top 5 challenges of the evolving data center. Roy comes to the party here with 20 years of experience in data center engineering and security. Just a couple of housekeeping items here. The presentation today is going to be running around 45 minutes, so hopefully you have adequate time here to stay in with the whole presentation. We will have an opportunity to interact. We have a chat, open chat right now, so any questions that you have, feel free to post those questions during the presentation. Then we will review those questions and go over any other comments at the end of the webinar. The giveaway today is for the Echo Spot. That to be able to participate in that that drawing, you'll need to remain to the end of the webinar. So today's agenda, we just went over the introductions real quickly. I'm going to go over Virtual Graffiti and our partnership with Trend Micro, and then we'll go into the presentation of the 5 challenges of the hybrid cloud security webinar, and then we'll have the post-webinar discussion. So Virtual Graffiti, we are a California-based reseller. We were founded in 2000, located in Irvine, California. We have locations in Australia, United Kingdom, and Israel, so we do some international business. We're a reseller of 200 leading vendor brands in multiple verticals. We service customers across all industries, sizes, SMB to enterprise and government. And we do have specialists on staff for cyber and network security. Currently, we're in about 160,000 customers worldwide. So we do touch a lot of different areas and a lot of different clients. A lot of experience here. Trend Micro, we are a gold partner of theirs. We've been a partner for about 15 years. We are on a gold partner status. We have about 30 salespeople and pre-sales engineering team dedicated to our company, Virtual Graffiti. Our microsite for Trend Micro is trenddefense.com. That's a dedicated website for information, for pricing. We allow purchases online. We have product specialists that you could talk to via live chat, email, or phone. This is a look of our website here. It's pretty easy to navigate. There's a lot of documentation, data sheets there, and access to, at the lower right, to talk to us via 24/7 chat. So I'm going to discuss today just real quickly a summary of about the history of the evolving data center and kind of explain where the term hybrid cloud is coming from. So traditionally, data centers were on-premise, generally located in electrical rooms, storage rooms, sometimes adjacent buildings, and even in restrooms. However, as organizations began to expand into multiple locations, it became necessary for data centers to evolve as well in order to keep up with growth of data centers, users, and applications. With the assistance of virtualization, high-speed internet connections, and SAN storage, data centers were keeping pace with demand, but were still outgrowing their respective environments. Due to increasing costs of real estate and utilities, organizations began looking into alternative hosting options for their ever-growing infrastructure. This is when terms like rack space and colos were used by organizations that needed to extend data centers, disaster recovery to multiple locations, sometimes even remote areas. Even at this point, organizations still needed a method to deliver their applications to the global market. Now steps in infrastructure as a service, coined IAAS, aka cloud services. With the assistance of Amazon, AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, and IBM Cloud, even small organizations can now bring their applications into global service, which has led to the adoption of hybrid cloud, a combination of on-premise hosting and IaaS as a strategy. Now, with all the data spread through multiple environments, how do we keep it secure? Introducing Trend Micro's presentation today, the top 5 challenges of the evolving data center. So I'm going to go ahead and hand this presentation over to Roy Ballard. Roy's going to take over here just a second.
So good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us to go over the top 5 challenges of the evolving data center. So the first thing I wanted to talk about and the changes around the evolving data center, or specifically the term hybrid cloud, and why this has even been coined. So if we think about what's happened, unless of course you've just started your business very recently, you've got servers and infrastructures in the physical world or the virtual world, and maybe some of you have some VDI infrastructure as well. You possibly have a few things as well in the cloud. So for those of you that may be just a bit more progressive, you may have some newer stuff like containers, or possibly on the bleeding edge with Lambda functions with AWS, or maybe in Azure with serverless. But regardless, there's a lot of different environments out there. And the reality is that all those different environments also have different technology pieces that come into play that make the environment of the hybrid cloud a little more complex. But there is some good news, and we're going to discuss this as we walk through these myths and what you can do about that. But the reality is that hybrid cloud is common, and hybrid cloud is something you need to plan for because you're in the middle of it today, and there are some great ways to deal with this as part of your reality. So when you look at some leading analyst firms, like for example, here's one from Gartner Research. You know that Gartner says that cloud workloads are different than end-user facing endpoints. So what Gartner is referring to is when they say cloud workloads, what they're really talking about are servers, whether they are in the data center or whether they're in the cloud. And you can see they are talking about hybrid private or public cloud models that make things even more complicated. So the important thing to note here as part of this recommendation is that you're looking for your strategy around hybrid cloud. It is much different than you would think about it in your, the traditional ways of thinking, like endpoints, or even Gartner in the past has thought the same thing about servers as just another endpoint. But with these analyst recommendations, you can see they are literally saying they are not just another endpoint. And there's such a massive difference between the two. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about the different myths that are out there. So we will run through different myths, and we're talking about what the implications are. So number one, you can only solve server security with only one technique. And I think that the only thing we needed to do on a server is to apply file-based security, or in other words, just the traditional anti-malware, that might be interesting. But to tie back to the Gartner quote is that these servers are not traditional endpoints or user-focused endpoints. These are totally different, and that's important because on these servers, there's a lot more things going on that are relevant. I mean, things like network-based attacks that effectively, if you don't have more than one technique on there, they can get access to your servers, because most of your servers are in fact exposed to the internet or exposed to some sort of network, whether that's a publicly facing or maybe it's your intranet or inside your organization where attacks come through lateral movement, or another term of saying this is east and west traffic. So you've got system type vulnerabilities as well that you need to watch for. And then, of course, users, whether they are mistaken on what they do, like a simple configuration mistake, or in fact, some users are maliciously doing things within your environment. And I know many have heard this term. That's why there's no silver bullet, if you will, or in one specific way, you should be applying security. I like to use this analogy here. It's a funnel analogy, and what it does is it illustrates that the importance of applying multiple techniques and why. Here we use the right technique at the right time, and we show a cross-generational blend of threat defense techniques. So simply put, cross-generational means that there's a lot of things out there today in security techniques that are very effective that deal with known good and known bad, i.e. with this picture, we've got known good that are the clear circles, the known bad, which are the dark circles, and the unknown, which are the gray circles. The good thing is, especially when dealing with high-performing server environments, what is ideal is to bat away the known good and the known bad items at the top of the funnel while utilizing very, very little resources in a very efficient manner. Then, with the newer technologies that are a bit more intensive, like machine learning or behavior analysis, which is where your ransomware protection takes place, that can help with, like ransomware, to detect that. Runtime machine learning and sandboxing. Myth number two, there's multiple environments and multiple tools, and complexity abounds. I was just in a conference last week with 55,000 other nerds and geeks, and this was a myth that we talked about specifically. Well, here's the reality. There's a lot of tools that have been developed and that are very, very good, and many of you are possibly using them in the data center today. But when you layer things in like cloud, it oftentimes, and what happens in organizations, will leverage new tools in the cloud Sometimes that's because a particular department has chosen to go ahead and deploy a project in the cloud, or the fact that there are assumptions that tools built for data center will not work in the cloud. Then you add on other things like this on the far right with containers, and then other new tools that can be used. So that's quite a bit of complexity. And what makes it even more difficult is that it's additive. So now your organization needs to deal with multiple security controls as a part of what you're doing. And that's an assumption that many organizations have made. And we've worked with many organizations that have made these assumptions as they move to the cloud. So there's some critical requirements here. And the good news is, and it's reinforced by some requirement definitions that, I apologize, the screen jumped ahead, pardon me. So that there are some vendors out there that can support all of these environments in one. In fact, Gartner's recommendation is that you, the consumer of these services and software and these capabilities, should require vendors to support the security and the visibility that are across your physical, your virtual, and in fact, multiple cloud environments that you may have. So you may hear, or many of you do hear, about many organizations that want to leverage different cloud providers at the same time, and that you should be able to do that from one single policy management framework and console, or basically a simple, you want to access this stuff from a single pane of glass, because ultimately, if you can, your life is going to become operationally more efficient, and it's definitely going to be more secure. So, if we think about the environment that is out there, you've got the data center, which has technologies like VMware, Hyper-V, and others as well. But then you also have the cloud that includes AWS, let's see, Google Cloud, Azure, there's even Docker containers, and etc. These are tools out there that allow you to manage that hybrid cloud or your own evolving cloud space from one single entity or console. And that includes multiple environments and technologies, pardon me, not environments, but technologies that can be leveraged across your whole infrastructure. Things like I showed in the funnel, like the IPS, the intrusion prevention, the anti-malware, let's see, integrity monitoring, application control. But it also allows you to manage all those resources from a single management console in ways that make sense to your business. Myth number 3, I should always rely on perimeter defense. So I've got a perimeter placed in today, and I'm protecting my organization, and I should always depend on this perimeter defense. With my 20 plus years of data center engineering, I had this mindset for quite some time because I was very dependent on the north-south traffic to protect my server workloads. But the perimeter defense works really well in this data center. Where it breaks down is when you start adding the cloud and some of those challenges that are introduced when you try to use a perimeter defense in a cloud include things like, for instance, you're going to have limited bandwidth on the virtual appliance that you're utilizing. It's the virtual appliance that's controlling access to all the server workloads that sit in the cloud. Simply what I'm trying to say is that if there are a lot of workloads or high volume, or maybe these workloads have a high capacity type of activity going on, the bandwidth that is there that's provided by these virtual appliances need to somehow manage that. And that is very, very difficult for those appliances to do. It also means there's a single point of failure versus having multiple endpoints of redundancy that's built in. And then finally, because these perimeter approaches are at the perimeter, they are designed to actually provide overall security, and they are not designed to provide content space security. Excuse me. And what that really means, folks, is that the best approach is host-based IPS. and is underlined by many things. Things like there is unlimited bandwidth to each of the hosts. So whatever your bandwidth is for one host, it's the exact same for the other host. So there's no constraints based on the number of workloads you have. And that can be extremely important when you start to think about auto-scaling or in high-volume environments that you're dealing with, and you don't want to get stuck. So even though you scale your workloads, that you're going to get throttled back. It also allows you not to have one single point of failure. So in the cloud, the opportunity for automated redundancy is extremely rich. In that, what you can do is you can automate and you can scale environments like AWS, like Azure. So now with the contextual, or basically the host-based security, what that means is that your alert levels are going to be lower, or that you've got a lot less false positive, which in turn is less information that you or your admins within your organization have to deal with on a day-to-day basis in your day-to-day operations. Which also means that not only are you getting better security on these workloads, you're also saving yourself operational impact and time, which of course allows you to do more with the resources that are more integral and more valuable to your business. Okay? The other thing that HostBase does, and as we look at vulnerabilities out there, the fact is that vulnerabilities are constant, and they're constantly coming up, and they don't seem to go away. So you probably remember Heartbleed or maybe Shell Shock, which came out a couple of years ago. Those were major vulnerabilities that were easily accessible by malicious attackers. The fact that patches took a while, that these types of applications that were leveraging these vulnerable pieces of software, that you'd assume, though, that over time they would get addressed. So here at Trend, we did a quick search earlier this year in April, and there are still over 140,000 servers out there that were still vulnerable to Heartbleed. Patches are available for many of these things, and either the patches have not been applied or organizations just don't know. I mean, this is a very accessible vulnerability. So not only with the Heartbleed and the Shell Shocks, but there's so many newer vulnerabilities that come out on a regular basis. So what you need to make sure that your security can be applied based on the context, and you need to know what the applications are that are out there. So including those in Windows environments. In the past, we've had multiple application vulnerabilities that came out that didn't make Patch Tuesday for several months. There were 0 days that were available. Then many of the clients that I still work with have Windows 2003. That went out of support a couple years ago with Microsoft. And something else that organizations have to think about is how to do that. How do we protect those environments? Virtual patching at the host and leveraging a host-based IPS. That reduces your emergency patching for one. For two, you can provide patches where no patches are going to show up, like with Windows 2003. And really, it's not about OSs, but also about the applications that are layered on top of these operating systems. And the combination of both the application and operating system environments that need to be looked at, hence why context-based security becomes so critical. Alrighty, now, we're moving to myth number 4. I shouldn't trust the cloud service provider. Cloud is insecure. Now, in 2018, you'd think in this day and age that, like with Amazon, with Azure, with other cloud providers that have been around a while, this wouldn't really be a myth. And that would be actually pretty clear. In fact, those providers are very secure. When we listen to the news and we listen to the feeds and stuff, and the Twitter, we don't hear a lot about breaches with cloud providers. but you know it's still out there, and we still hear that from a lot of organizations, okay? Cloud providers, in fact, are very secure. They've done things that many organizations who don't have the horsepower, or maybe they don't have the ability or the sophistications, perhaps just on the organization side itself, to deal with things like the separation of duties or the logical and physical access, as well as specific policies and procedures that can help you with things with compliance, depending on where you are. And so in this case, I'll give you an example. Let's look at AWS. So AWS has extensive information about how they deal with security, including the concept of the shared responsibility model. And I'll go over shared responsibility here in just a minute, and how this model works with security as well as with compliance. So AWS deals with many types of compliance around the world, and they help organizations to help understand what it is they do and how they do it in a very, very, very secure way, much like Microsoft Azure does. Sorry about that. A little bit of delay here on the slides, everybody. So, but Azure has got extensive information as well. So the long and the short of that myth is, in fact, cloud service providers are very secure. So you should never, one thing you should always do is never feel shy about asking them about their policies, their procedures, as well as their assurance levels. Now, whether this is AWS, whether this is Azure, or maybe it's a local service, cloud service provider, you should be able to get that information and understand how secure they are. All right, myth number 5. Cloud is the hardest part of hybrid cloud security. So when we look at our organizations today, at a high level, everyone has similar sets of infrastructure and components that they have to deal with. So you've got to deal with your contents, you have to deal with your platforms, you have to deal with your applications, your OSs, and other things that you need to deal with. But in terms of compute, of network, of storage, well, the way the cloud works, as I alluded to in a previous couple of slides, is that the cloud, there is actually a shared responsibility model, which in fact can make the security in the cloud even easier, because all of a sudden the cloud provider is in fact responsible for a large amount of the foundational or infrastructural part of the security services that you normally need to provide in your data centers. Things like the physical security, things like making sure your compute, your storage, your networking, your databases are all available. One thing is, whenever I started migrating to the cloud several years ago, I no longer had to rack and stack. It was so nice that I could just bypass the first 3 layers and just focus on what I was putting in the cloud. This responsibility model is available all around the world and in specific areas. Now, your responsibility is, in fact, that anything that you put in the cloud, you need to provide the mechanism, or you need to apply the right level of security to that. And that simply means that you have the opportunity to skip all this foundational stuff like racking and stacking, the cabling, power, etc. And then, because the way the cloud works, you actually apply some very, very powerful new and automated ways of dealing with security. You can apply perhaps maybe stricter access controls, because there are oftentimes these defined projects that you have to work on, and you only want specific people inside your organization that should have access to it. There's a very strong ability to have continuous auditing provided by the cloud providers. There are things out there like the AWS CloudTrail and others that are out there, as well as tools that private cloud providers can provide. So these auditing tools give you a tremendous amount of visibility into what's going on in your server workloads. And then as an application of security, you can make sure that when you leverage a host-based approach, that you can apply the right security controls based on the context of whatever instance or server happens to spin up at whatever point of time, whether that's with auto scaling up or maybe auto scaling down, whether that's in one zone or it's in another region, or whether that's across multiple cloud service providers. The opportunity, and we've heard this from multiple customers around the world, in fact, is that you can be more secure, you can be more efficient because of the automation that you have and the ability to apply. So with that, the top five, what we've done here is cloud security can be easier than data security. And if we go back to myth number 2, which I mentioned it, I think, twice already, is if you apply security that can straddle or deal with all the environments, you have a much greater opportunity to be much more efficient. Here's a quote that I have. It's one of our client CISOs summed it up so well. He said, security used to be thought of as an inhibitor to development, but not anymore. Our teams understand that security is built into the environment and that the security team isn't going to hold or stop releases. The security team is helping steer the effectiveness of cloud operations. And that's by Jim Hoover. He's a CISO for Infor, and he's allowed us to utilize that comment for this webinar. So hopefully what you can take away from this webinar is that you can take security, you can integrate it, you can automate it in your environments and still make sure you can deal with things like compliance and other types of requirements that your business has by leveraging the benefits of the cloud and really taking advantage of it, and ultimately debunking the myth that cloud security is hard. So, all right, we just talked about the top 5 myths of hybrid cloud security, and hopefully with this webinar, you've heard it from me that we've busted those myths with hybrid cloud security or the evolving data center. It doesn't have to be hard, and it does not have to be complicated. So we do have a few recommendations here. Within Trend, we have a product called Trend Micro Deep Security. And what that product does is it provides advanced user security for everything I mentioned above, for your physical, for your virtual, for your cloud servers. I mean, this includes an on-prem protection with VMware integration, with Hyper-V, as well as cloud protection with AWS, with Azure, and private cloud providers as well. It protects enterprise applications and data from breaches and business disruptions with virtual patching. I talked to some people just recently that they're not sure what virtual patching is. Basically, it's a quick way to protect your servers with rules that can be applied very quickly with your security policies in order to prevent an exploit, or basically a 0-day, from occurring as a result of this newly discovered vulnerability. So basically, you're protected until the patch comes out from the vendor, okay? Deep security also works with a central pane of glass, and this helps you simplify your security operations. It also enables regulatory compliance and some local compliance that maybe you have to work with, and as well as accelerating the ROI of virtualization in your cloud projects. So with that, I'm going to end it, and if you have any questions, please work with Joe. He and his security experts can discuss implementing deep security into your evolving data center. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the time you spent today. Joe, back to you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Roy. That was very insightful. We kind of took a different approach on this webinar. We wanted to look at it at a solution perspective versus just going into user interface, you know, showing you multiple features and everything from deep security. That's something we could definitely set anybody up with. We could do personalized demos, 30-day evaluations, anything with Trend Micro. So that being said, let's take a look real quick and see if we have any questions out there from the audience through the chat there. Let's see, we do have one right now, Roy, if you want to answer this one. Which technology platforms does deep security apply to? Deep security licensing apply to?
Which technology, what kind of licensing?
Yeah,
So
I guess
it's
like, is
yeah.
it accessible to Hyper-V, VMware?
Yeah.
Maybe
So
you could explain a little bit about that.
absolutely. So with deep security, it's agent-based. We drop an agent on your server workload. We don't care if it's in a VMware environment. We don't care if it's in a Hyper-V environment, Azure environment. We drop an agent. The licensing is per agent, or it's host-based protection.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. And then I got another question here. Can you apply deep security to public cloud environments, which I think we went over through. Maybe you can just highlight that again.
Absolutely. I think what happened was that question was probably early on in the conversation, because we did cover that. Absolutely, we cover it so very seamlessly. In fact, we are with Trend Micro. We go way back with VMware several years. We were, I don't want to get into the marketing side of this as a technical person, but we were the #1 security vendor with VMware last year, 2017. We're at the top of the list with AWS. We work directly with these providers, with these vendors, to provide the best solution possible to protect clients.
Perfect. That sounds good. I think we just got maybe one more question here. Somebody wants to know exactly how is deep security priced? Is this based on resource or is this per node? Maybe you could explain a little bit about that.
Yeah, no. Once again, it's per agent. So it's per, or you could say per node. So let's just say you have 10 AWS AMI instances. That's 10 licenses. You have 10 Hyper-V licenses. That's 10 licenses, and these all apply to the server itself. So basically, you just drop the agent. Whatever agent you drop on there, you pay per agent. I hope I'm clear on that, Joe.
Yeah, I think that's clear. And again, when we address these opportunities with any of our clients, we could, firm that up and provide them with formal quotes and everything. So, looks like we're finishing up here a little sooner than we thought. So, just want to kind of go over a few things and close. The drawing for the Echo spot that will be done after the webinar. We'll look and make sure everybody that stayed to the end there will be qualified in the drawing, and we'll be notifying that winner by email. Just again, up on the screen, trenddefense.com is our microsite for Trend Micro, where you can go for more resources, talk with live technicians, sales technicians, and then get scoped out and quoted for any opportunities or projects that you have on the roadmap for next year. You can always email us at sales@trenddefense.com. That's easier. Then go into the chats, and if there's anything, in general that you have any feedback about the presentation today, any more information, please feel free to contact us there, or you can contact us at our 1-800 number at 1-800-886-5369. We go by trenddefense.com, and Virtual Graffiti would be the parent company. So in conclusion, just wanted to thank everybody for attending today. And again, please follow up with myself or the Trend Defense site there. Sales@trenddefense.com. We look forward to having more webinars in the future and appreciate your attendance today. Thank you very much and have a nice day.